Okay. Well, thank you all for joining our webinar this month. Today, we are going to be talking about college enrollment and making sure that your students get all of their admissions items complete. So, right now, we are about a week or a few days actually from the community service deadline. So, I know that all of your students are probably pushing towards that deadline, doing their community service, getting all of those hours submitted. But once that is finished, the next action item is going to be making sure that your students actually get enrolled, get started at the college of their choice. So today we have Haley Clark here with us. She is the director of Knox Access, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself and her role here at Tennessee Achieves.
Yeah, thanks. So with the access program here that we have in Knox County, we are embedded into the public high schools and get to help seniors during that last year of high school apply to all of the colleges and that kind of stuff. So we are very familiar with what they need to be doing to finish their applications and ensure that they get started on campus in the fall.
Yeah. So Haley is the perfect person to be talking about this with us today. She does this every single day here at Tennessee Achieves. That is her primary role. Haley, could you tell us what are the steps students need to complete in order to begin college this upcoming fall? So, what are the big things that students need to be prioritizing right now?
Yes, so the first thing would just be to finish their admissions application if they haven't already. A lot of them probably did this, during the school year or whatever, but sometimes there's missing requirements. Maybe they need to upload a photo of their ID for some colleges, just stuff like that. So they can check their college portal. They should have an account with their college, and that can tell them if their application is complete or if they're missing any requirements. So that would be the first thing. And then the next thing would be that they need to meet with an advisor to pick out their classes for the fall. Super important that they do this with their advisor and don't try to pick anything out themselves. We want to make sure that everything they're taking will be making progress toward their degree, count for financial aid, all that good stuff.
That's awesome. And how will students go about getting an advising appointment typically?
Yeah, so it does vary a little bit by college, but most of the time they can set that up in their college portal account. They usually can log in and schedule an appointment, or sometimes they'll get an email from the advisor asking them to use a certain link and sign up. If they're not sure, they can always just call the admissions office at their college and they will give them the specific instructions for that school.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I always tell students when in doubt, call the college. They will point you in the right direction of the people that you need to talk to. So that is my number one piece of advice always. You mentioned earlier that if students haven't completed their application, that they should go ahead and get that completed. What institutions are still accepting applications? I know some colleges have closed them at this point. Can you tell us, the differences between when the deadlines are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, every school has different deadlines. I will say that most of the four-year schools, most of those universities have closed their application for the fall, but all of the community colleges in the state are still accepting applications, and most of them will accept applications at least through the end of July. TCATs are usually pretty similar. So if a student, hasn't applied yet or something's come up and they need to switch to a community college closer to home or something like that, they absolutely still have time to get that application submitted.
Yeah. And that's why we always encourage students to keep up with those Tennessee Promise requirements. So things like the FAFSA, the community service requirement, even if they were planning to attend a four-year college, they can always switch really up until when classes start. So that's why we always encourage students to keep up with the requirements. You never know when your plans might change, and they keep those applications open up until the last second for those type of students as well.
I'll add in there too. I mean, you're going to see to Baylor's point that we're coming up on a community service deadline July 1st. And you're going to see students who are meeting that deadline, are promise committed, but you're also going to see students who are saying, well, I'm going to UT Chattanooga this fall. I'm set. To Baylor's point, encourage those students to still meet this deadline. Get at least 8 hours in, because I'm sure Haley's seen it before. I know Baylor's seen it before. I've seen it before. You're going to have students who reach out in July and are like, shoot, I need to go to Chat State now. I need to go to Pellissippi. I need to go to Malo, whatever it may be. And if they meet this deadline, they've got promises, that insurance policy. Our our end goal is always to get students to a college. So if that's a four-year school, great. If that's technical school, amazing. But we also want to make sure that for a student who does have that plan A of a four-year institution, they've got Promise still as an insurance policy, at least through August.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Tyler. Haley, you also mentioned something about students setting up their college portal. Can you talk a little bit about what is a college portal and why it's important to set it up early?
Yeah, absolutely. So the college portal is going to be super important because that is really where the students are going to find all of the important information, really regarding everything about college. Typically, after they apply, usually a few days or a week after they apply, they get an email with instructions about how to set up their college portal most of the time. Other colleges will also have instructions for setting it up on their website, like on the admissions page. So I would just encourage the students to make sure that they follow those instructions to go ahead and make sure that they have that account set up. Because once they have that account set up, it will tell them if they have any action items left to complete. Maybe they need to turn in a photo of their ID or submit financial aid documents, or immunization records, or just any number of different things that they could need to do. And typically, that is also where they will schedule those advising appointments or orientation or anything like that. So they definitely need to set up those college portals.
That's a really great point, Haley. Even after a student submits their admissions application, that does not mean that they're done and ready to start. They've gotten a significant portion of the important things completed, but they will have some remaining checklist things. So they'll have to do things like submit your ID, maybe some extra financial aid verification documents. So they will need to be checking that college portal up until when they enroll in those classes, to make sure that all of those action items are completed and that they're ready to start classes in the fall. And like you said, you can also schedule your advising appointment there. They'll register for classes there. It's where all of those big important things will be housed is in their college portal. So when students are meeting with their advisor and registering for classes, what are some things that they should keep in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the number one thing I would say is that students want to ensure that they are registering as a full-time student. So, that would be 12 credit hours. That is usually about 3 to 4 classes, but as long as they meet that 12 credit hour requirement, they'll be good to go there. I also always like to tell students too that don't delay like having an advising appointment just because you haven't picked out your major yet. A lot of students have the thought process that they have to know what they want to study, before they can even sign up for classes, but that is not true at all. They don't even necessarily need to know a major in their first year. They have plenty of time to kind of explore and really just fulfill those general education requirements. The vast majority of majors require those general ed courses. And so that's going to be your standard math class, history class, a biology class, maybe an art class, whatever. Just they have those general ed classes that everyone has to do. And so that is usually what those advisors are going to be having them sign up for their first semester anyway. So those are two big things, but another thing that has come up a lot when I've talked to students is to really be paying attention to the class times that they're signing up for. Sometimes they might not have a choice. Sometimes, one class might only be offered at a certain time and you got to pick whatever the option is. But if there's different options, don't just pick the first one. Like, really take a minute to think about how that's going to work for your schedule, right? Like, I had a student once where they picked all morning classes and then like one class at 4 p.m., but they didn't have a way to get home in between. So then they were just like on campus for like 7 hours or something like that. Um, or, if you don't want to go to classes in the evening, don't sign up for a night class or make sure it'll work with your work schedule or just any number of things to really pay attention to those class times.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know a lot of our students have jobs while they're going to college, so making sure that they're coordinating their class schedule and their work schedule so that they can make it to both of those things. That I think is important.
Can I jump in there, Baylor, for a second?
Yeah, of course.
The point Haley just made is such an important one. And I think when you think about these next steps as a mentor, hopefully your students have applied, right? They've got to do orientation, register for classes. Those are all things that, like, as a mentor, you can encourage your students to reach out to the college about, to work with through the college. But it's not our expectation, right, that you are sitting down and registering for classes alongside a student, that you are going to orientation. Your role as a mentor is to get them there, to make sure that they get those things taken care of. But the point that Haley just made, that is a space that you can be so helpful for your student in. If they're saying, hey, I'm going to register for classes tomorrow, say, hey, before you do that, think critically about your schedule. Think proactively about your transportation. Think about how many hours you need to work. I say this often on these webinars. I'm sure everyone's heard me say it before, but 18, 19-year-olds are not always the most proactive group of thinkers on the planet. So if you as a mentor can equip them to be proactive, to think about the things Haley just talked about, like, hey, are you actually okay having a 6 hour break on campus? Hey, will that actually give you enough time to get to work? Um, are you actually going to be awake at 8 a.m. for that class? These sort of questions will help to set your student up for success when they actually go to register. I mean, like Haley said, there are not always going to be options. Sometimes an 8:30 a.m. class is an 8:30 a.m. class, and that's going to college. That's, becoming an adult. But also when there are options, let's help them to think about those options and make sure they're building a schedule that really works for them and all the things that we know that our students are having to juggle as they get started.
Yeah, I like to say like one of our biggest jobs as mentors is to help develop these students into adults and give them the soft skills that they need to take on this new phase of life. And that's a great point, is helping them problem solve and critically think about their schedules, how they should get in touch with people, all of those kind of things I think are important and a great place that you can plug in as a mentor as well. All right, Haley. One of our last questions is, once students register for classes, what supplies should they be looking for? What should they be focusing on after they've gotten all of those action items completed?
Yes. So once they've registered and done all of those things, their next focus should really be on getting ready for the fall semester, making sure they have all the supplies, that kind of stuff. I get a lot of questions from the students about when to buy their books. Most of the colleges will load what books they need like into their student portal or send them an email or something like that. But a lot of times the professors will give more information during that first week of class too. So I kind of just tell them to like maybe check in with their professor on the first day of class about what they need for that class. I also get a lot of questions about if they should buy the books online or from the campus bookstore. I usually recommend the campus bookstore because a lot of times they have the ability to use like any leftover financial aid sometimes or things like that. They'll get them quicker. Sometimes they can rent them, that kind of stuff. But if a student is going to be purchasing them outright, they absolutely can purchase them online too. That's always an option. Another school supply that students often don't necessarily think of immediately is a laptop. Most of the high schools, if not all of the high schools in Tennessee, provide students with a laptop, but they usually have to return that when they graduate. And so they might not have a laptop going into their first semester of college. That is super important. Most classes have some type of work that needs to be submitted online, even if it is not an online class. Most of the in-person classes will still require assignments to be turned in online. I've had students try before to, write papers from their phone or their iPad or whatever, and well, I guess it's possible. I definitely don't recommend it. It's a lot easier to do all of those college assignments on a laptop. And then, of course, they'll need the traditional classic school supplies as well, right? Like they're going to want to come prepared with notebooks, pens, pencils, a calculator for a math class, all of those classic school supplies as well.
Yeah, that's really great. I think the laptop is super important. Like you said, the high schools provide them, so it's something that a student could miss, but it is absolutely critical in today's age and school system that they have a laptop or a working laptop. So I think that's a really great thing to highlight. Thanks, Haley.
Yeah.
Tyler, do we have any questions in the chat that I can go over?
Well, I think it's important to, yes, but I also think talking about these, like, having a laptop, textbooks, things like that. Um, One of the things our students, first gen low income students, the students we're targeting with mentorship, often struggle with is this idea of like advocating for themselves, right? And like Haley mentioned, many students may have a surplus of financial aid, Pell Grant funding that they can use to apply to books at the campus bookstore. Many campuses offer technology resources, right? I was just on a campus last week where a student can walk in early August and check out a laptop for the semester. So they're not having to necessarily spend $250 or $300 on a laptop. But instead, their college will provide that. They just have to ask for it. And so again, coming back to this idea of, there are these really critical next steps that they're going to work through with the college, just like we talked about how, you can help your mentor or your student to think proactively about the college process and about registering for classes. I think one of the most valuable things you can do as we come up to August enrollment here, which is summer's going very fast this year. It's coming up around the corner, is advocate for themselves, right? Talk to the bookstore, figure out if they do have a surplus that they can use towards books. Poke around their campus website, figure out do they have technology resources that I can leverage so I can save some money to help pay for gas to get to and from campus. These resources exist. And I think empowering your student, talking to them about looking around, not being afraid to ask, giving them those tools and resources and the confidence to leverage the things that exist for them on campus can be a really impactful thing that you can do over the next few months. You will find that some of your students graduated high school in May, really, really focused on going to school, really committed to that goal. But now we're on what, June 26th here. We've got another month and a half before classes start. That confidence and that commitment to that goal may start to waver a bit. And so the more you can do to empower your students, encourage your students, and lift them up through this process and let them know that there are supports for them, the more likely they are to stay really locked in and committed to that goal. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's an important thing to think about as we think about these final few months of getting your students in the door, which at the end of the day is the ultimate goal of this mentor program.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tyler. That role of encourager is really going to come into play at this point. They're not with their school counselors and their teachers and the high school staff. So you're going to be the person that's like their number one point of contact during this time. And a lot of them are just going to run into those life things like, hey, there's a hold on my account. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm getting scared. I don't want to go to college anymore. And you can just encourage them, like, hey, let's check into this. And it might be something as easy as they need to submit a picture of their ID. So making sure that students are actually like looking into those barriers and facing them head on rather than kind of shying away, and letting that serve as an obstacle for them getting enrolled into college, I think is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's, when we think about the mentor program, encourager role has always, will always be the bedrock of what you do. It's just lifting the student up during this time. We got some questions in the chat. I'm going to run through these. Baylor, I think this one will be best for you. How do we know if students have done their community service hours?
That's a really great question. So if you log on to your mentor portal, which is at the bottom of all of your Mentor Monday emails, it's going to be at the left-hand side of the bottom. You click that icon and it'll take you to your mentor portal. And there it will show how many hours have been completed towards the fall community service deadline, which is July 1st. So if students have at least submitted 8 hours of community service, they have met the fall deadline. Like we mentioned in last month's webinar, we are encouraging students to complete 16 hours so that they do not have to meet additional deadlines for this upcoming school year. However, if they submit at least 8 hours of community service, they will be good to start classes and remain eligible for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship this upcoming fall. So you can find all of that information in your mentor portal, which is in your Monday email.
Perfect. And another question. What do we do if our mentees are still not responding or haven't responded in a little while at this stage?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Like Tyler mentioned, sometimes we have students that are a little bit harder to get in touch with during the summertime. They're traveling, they're doing things. I would say don't lose hope. Maybe take a short little break from contacting them, maybe take 2 weeks off, and then reach out to them again. And I always like to say, hey, like, I hope you're doing well. If you have any questions, I'm always here for you. I'd love to schedule a call and chat. Sometimes that open-ended communication can help stir on a conversation, but definitely don't lose hope. Students will come to you when they have a question. I promise they're always going to hit some type of obstacle and they're going to turn to their mentor for a question.
I would also say Linda, who asked this question, and I hope this isn't the case, so I'll preface this by saying that sometimes students do not respond they do not complete community service and they lose eligibility for Tennessee Promise. What is sometimes the case there is the email that then breaks through to them and gets them thinking about college is the one from our team that lets them know, hey, you have lost your eligibility for Tennessee Promise. Wish that wasn't the case, but that's just sometimes how humans work. The reason I say that is that may be the point where the student does reach out to you and say, "Hey, I got this email from Tennessee Promise. What do I do? What does this mean?" You know, because our end goal is to get these students to college, start talking to that student then and say, hey, like, I see you aren't eligible for promise, but let's talk about what can happen next. And of course, we don't expect you to have all those answers. Reach out to Baylor, reach out to me, and we will help you to guide that student. But use that as an opportunity to kind of redirect the student and say, hey, let's still apply to TCAT or let's still apply to wherever, and let's figure out how we can get you started there and what financial aid you do qualify for. So, it's certainly not a guarantee, but I have seen it before where sometimes students kind of reactively reach out, which, of course, we wish it wasn't that way, but again, it's just how it works sometimes. Haley, another question for you here. We talked a little bit about a laptop. We talked about books. Is there anything else that you would recommend student gets to get ready for school to get started?
That's a good question. I feel like the books, the general school supplies, the laptop, those are probably like the basic ones that they need, right? But it's also a good time to start thinking about transportation to school, right? Like if you don't have a car, how are you going to get to campus? Can you take public transportation? Can you get a ride? Is there a ride share group for your college? All of those things are super important too. And then I always encourage them to just check with their professors, their syllabus about any other specific tools they might need for that specific class. Sometimes art classes, you also need to bring, paintbrushes, or sometimes you need to bring your own SD card for your photography class or whatever that may look like.
And I think that's a really great point, Haley. And as well, if your student is going to a TCAT, they will have a list of tools that they have to purchase for their
Yes.
program as well. So make sure that they're looking at that. Typically, tools are not covered by Tennessee Promise, so students will just want to be aware of that extra cost as well.
Got a lot of great questions today. I got two more. First of all, if a student, and either you can answer this, but if a student shows that they're going to TCAT or Columbia State on their profile for a mentor, does that mean they're 100% going? They've applied, they've been accepted. Is that an indication they are set at that school if that school is listed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that means that that's where the student has indicated that they would like to go based on their TSAC portal. I think this is a great point of connection that mentors can connect with students over. So check in, make sure that that is really where they want to go. Make sure that they've received an admissions email saying that they have officially been accepted into the school. I think that's a really great point that you can connect with students over, that you can help guide them.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. Uh, all right, we got that one. Let me make sure we're getting all of these. I'll take this one really quick. Is there a list of resources that students can leverage for community service this weekend? Yeah, students can visit our website, tnAchieves.org. We have volunteer opportunities broken out by county, but we also have like single day events. I'm not sure how many are specifically this weekend, but I would definitely encourage your students to visit that resource, take a look at it, and reach out ASAP, obviously, for volunteer opportunities. Also do have virtual opportunities that students can leverage there as well. So would definitely encourage them to visit our website and leverage those resources as we come up on that July 1st deadline. Um, I think that's all the questions we have.
Great. Yeah,
Okay.
I did just
Yeah.
want to add at the end of this webinar, if your students have any questions about community service, or if you have any questions about community service, please reach out to myself, to Tyler, to anyone on our staff, and we would be happy to answer any of those questions. We want to make sure all of the students have gotten their community service submitted by that July 1st deadline. So please make it a priority to reach out to us if you have any lingering questions.
I'm going to jump in really quick. We got one more
Go
question.
ahead.
and I just want to address it. If your student gets flagged for basically a FAFSA verification, a FAFSA recheck. That is normal. Now, it's not every student's going to experience this, but it is a process that in some cases students are selected to essentially go through a verification process, and their college will work with them through that process to let them know what they need to provide. Typically, it's tax documents, perhaps it's financial, W-2s, whatever it may be. This is essentially just the process of verifying what a student placed on their FAFSA is indeed correct. The best thing your student can do if they are selected for this process is check their online account through the college and keep up to date with the financial aid office. They will flag and let you know what they need. You just got to keep on top of it. Sorry about that.
Nope, you were so good. Well, if we don't have any more questions, then I think that's all that I have. But I did just want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. And again, if you have any questions, please email us. We'd be happy to address those.
Thanks, everybody.